king of my wife. I'm not the king. God is, and he should be. And God made me responsible for her and for the children we've had. Not the ruler of my family, not the final last say in all things. It's not like, remember Tom Petty, never Heartbreakers? There's three of us. It's good to be a king. You get your own way. No, you don't get your own way. That's a good way to get heartbroken, is what that is. Because life's not going to go your way, nor should it. It should go God's way. Yes, my wife should submit to me as the church submits to Christ. And we should be submitting to one another, like it said in verse 25. Or, excuse me, what was that verse? Now I'm all discombobulated. Where we started. Submit to one another out of reverence to Christ, verse 21. And then we get to the guys' part. Fathers. So I'm all over my notes, now I lost my place again.
You were 24.
I'm in 25 now, yes. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. I don't think Paul could be any clearer here. And if we think about it, it makes a lot of sense. If my wife submits to me, if she gives me that authority, that control over herself, and I love her, and I'm willing to give myself up for her, then what's she losing? She's in a very good position. And I'm the one responsible. I'm the one that's become accountable to God for how my family goes. I wonder how many pastors are preaching that on Father's Day this morning. I'm not the king of my castle. I'm not the guy in charge. I'm the guy who gets in trouble with God when it's not working. Yes, we are the leaders of our families. That means we're responsible for them. Just like as your pastor, I'm the leader of Three Pines. So let's look at that. How much power and authority do I have over Three Pines? Only what you give me. I only have the power and authority that you give me. I would hope that I have a little influence over your guys, that my preaching and teaching can show you how to live a God-honoring life. But as far as power goes or authority, I have very little. And if you were to disagree with my leadership, you could vote me out just like that, and I'd be gone. Sadly, that same thing happens to a lot of marriages. You know, they don't get voted out; they just get walked out on. And marriage fails. Just like some people walk away from their church, and if enough walks away from the church fails. But as a husband, as a father, as a pastor, I have the same amount of authority over the church as I do over my wife. And if I'm not doing my job right, the church won't want to follow me. If I'm not being the husband right, treating my wife right, she's not going to want to follow me. If I'm being selfish, if I'm seeking what I can get out of it, the church, my family, any of that, I'm going to fail. I'll fail as a father, as a husband, as a pastor. These leadership positions are not to build me up. In fact, it's just the opposite. I'm to give myself up, first and foremost, to Christ. Then give myself up for my wife, and give myself up for my family, and give myself up for my church. And that's the priorities, by the way. If you weren't sure, that's, the church, Three Pines Community Church, you are not my highest priority. Sorry. God is.
Amen.
God is my highest priority. Amen. And then, according to Scriptures, my next highest priority is my wife and children. And then you guys come in. You're number 3. Oh. But fatherhood is not a God-given position of power and leadership and authority. It's a God-given position of responsibility and accountability for my wife and children, and as a pastor for my church. So remember that on Father's Day. Fatherhood done according to God's design is a thing of sacrificial love and service to our God, to our family, and to our church. And here in Ephesians 5, Paul even explains why fathers are to give themselves up for their wives. So with the little bit of time I have remaining, let's look at that. It started with husbands, love your wives, as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Verse 26 tells us why. To make her holy, cleansing her by the washing of water through the word, and to present to her to himself as a radiant church, not bride or wife, but now he changes it to church. without a stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. Context is everything here. Paul is making this connection between husbands and wives to brothers and sisters in the church, and he's doing this. He's like blurring them together, the relationship between a husband and his wife and the relationship between the church and Christ. They're like this. He's talking about them and even switching the words around and making it interchangeable. Jesus' responsibility is to make the church holy and blameless, without a blemish or a stain or a wrinkle, so that the church is holy and blameless. He started that work on the cross. And through the Word, through the Bible, and through His Spirit, He has forever since been working towards making the church holy and blameless. He is keeping up His end of the arrangement. The church, however, at least all too often, is not. We've seen this. You don't have to look very far to find a church that accepts sins, that accepts things the culture wants to practice that's contrary to the Bible. It's not a failure on Jesus' part. It's a failure on that particular church. But that's the goal. That's how God designed it to be, either between the church and Christ or between husbands and wives. Because that's how it's supposed to be. And the husband's responsibility is that she can be holy, cleansed, and washed, so that there's no stain, wrinkle, or blemish. And guys, I'm not saying go home and throw your wife in the shower, hose her off. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you need to lead your family through the Word, through prayer, through love. You think that because of your influence over your wife, your children, they should want Jesus as much as you claim you want Jesus. Maybe even more so. That's what you need to do. But in the next verse, Paul puts that same idea onto husbands and fathers. That we are the ones that are to be making our wives holy, cleansed, and washed, that there's no stain